The following teaching is by Jim Pugh through the Ministry of God is Government. If you have never listened to one of our Bridge of Truth podcasts and wish to see all the topics taught through this Bridge of Truth ministry, please go to www.godisgovernment.com to find the inventory of Bridge of Truth podcasts. Now, welcome Jim Pugh as he presents another historical study of truth from history, Bible scripture, or current events.
The Breaking of Nations, The Secret Army. In David Rockefeller, memoirs published in 2002 stated, "For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that is the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it." On June 13, 1941, the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, America's first intelligence agency, was set up in Rockefeller Center to collect and analyze all information and data which may bear upon national security. FDR placed General William Will Bill Donovan in charge of the agency. A scion of high society, Donovan was an Ivy League lawyer who had married Ruth Ramsey, the heiress of one of the richest families in America, and served as a director of the Rockefeller Foundation. The headquarters for the new agency was Rockefeller Center in New York, since it was funded and served as an appendage of the House of Rockefeller. 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the OSS set up secret training camps for agents in Maryland and Virginia. The agents were not ordinary men with ordinary means. Almost to a man, they were bankers, lawyers, businessmen, and accountants deeply embedded with the Council on Foreign Relations and the International Money Cartel. They included Henry Sturgis Morgan, son of J.P. Morgan Jr., Junius Morgan III, another son of J.P. Morgan Jr., Nicholas Roosevelt, chief correspondent of the New York Times, Paul Mellon, son of Andrew Mellon, Thomas Childs, a Rhodes Scholar and the Paris representative of Sullivan and Cromwell, David Bruce, Andrew Mellon's son-in-law, Shepard Morgan, director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, John Haskell, executive director of Rockefeller's National City Corporation, John Gardner, a director of the Carnegie Corporation, and members of the Vanderbilt, Carnegie, DuPont, and Ryan families. Donovan justified the practice of recruiting the social elite for the OSS by saying, "You can hire a second-story man and make him a better second-story man. But if you hire a lawyer or an investment banker or a professor, you have something else besides." Allen Dulles was a prime example of an OSS agent. A scion of the Eastern establishment, he came from a distinguished family of political dignitaries. John W. Foster, his material grandfather, had served as Secretary of State under Benjamin Harrison, and Robert Lansing, by marriage, had been Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of State. Dulles had attended the Paris Peace Conference with Wilson, where he had been instrumental in the creation of the Royal Institute on International Affairs and the Council on Foreign Relations. A tweedy, pipe-smoking corporate lawyer, Dulles, with his snake-like charm and Machiavellian ambition, had been credited with seducing over 100 women, including Clare Boothe Luce, the wife of Henry Luce, the founder of Time and Life, and Queen Frederica of Greece. Dulles entered the diplomatic service in 1916 and was stationed in Vienna and later Bern. From 1922 to 1926, he served as the chief of the Near East Division of the U.S. State Department. He left this post to join the Wall Street law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, where his brother John Foster Dulles was a partner. Sullivan and Cromwell floated bonds for Krupp AG the German arms manufacturer, and managed the finances of IG Farben. The most important clients of the firm were Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company of New Jersey and J.P. Morgan and Company. In addition to his law practice, Allen Dulles became the first president of the CFR in 1927. Thanks to this position, he deepened his ties with the House of Morgan and Rockefeller, while becoming intricately involved with the Chatham House, the Round Table, and the House of Rothschild. Dulles was placed in charge of the OSS office in Bern, Switzerland, where he decided that America was waging a war against the wrong enemy. He came to this conclusion at the close of 1942, when the German infantry remained mired in the mud and snow of the Russian steppes. He had received word via the Vatican from Schutzstaffel, SS, Chief Heinrich Himmler, and Walter Schellenberg, head of the Sicherheitsdienst, the SS Foreign Intelligence Service, that the Nazi government wished to establish a separate peace with the United States. Such reconciliation would enable the Third Reich to turn its undivided attention to pulverizing the Soviets. When Dulles expressed his openness to discuss the proposal, the German High Command sent Prince Max von Hohenlohe, a Prussian aristocrat and businessman, to meet with him in Bern. At the meeting, Hohenlohe was surprised to learn that Dulles not only endorsed the Nazi proposal, but also maintained that a strong Germany was necessary as a bulwark against Bolshevism, the Leninist faction of the Communist Party that had seized control of Russia in 1917. In a series of communiques with Donovan, who remained the OSS chief in Washington, Dulles expressed his eagerness to pursue the peace negotiations, believing that the Soviets posed a far greater threat to the United States and Western world stability than the Nazis. Having established contact with Hitler's high command, Dulles conducted meetings in Bern with Nazi General Reinhold Gehlen, the head of German military intelligence. Gehlen was a stiff, unassuming man with sparse blonde hair, a toothbrush mustache, and ears that stuck out of his head like radar antennas. Knowing that the defeat of the Third Reich was inevitable, he had concocted the idea of forming clandestine guerrilla squads, composed of Hitler Youth and die-hard fascist fanatics, as stay-behind units. These units, Gehlen informed Dulles, would serve as a police force to ward off a post-war Soviet invasion. The Nazi general referred to the members of his secret army as werewolves, individuals who function as ordinary citizens by day and communist fillers by night. Each werewolf unit, Gehlen said, had access to buried depots of food, radio equipment, weapons, and explosives. Believing the Soviets planned a takeover of Germany and Western Europe at the conclusion of the war, Dulles became convinced that the OSS must reach out to these stay-behind armies in order to supply them with tactical and strategic assistance. This task, he informed Donovan and the OSS top brass in Washington, could be accomplished through Gehlen and SS General Karl Wolff, another new Nazi friend of Dulles, who served as the SS adjutant to Mussolini and the Italian government. Along with securing and fortifying the werewolves, Dulles busied himself with arranging the separate peace with the Nazis that would exclude the Soviet Union. This undertaking became known as Operation Sunrise. The separate peace should be signed without delay. Dulles informed Donovan, since it would allow the Wehrmacht to deploy 3 divisions from northern Italy to the Eastern Front, where they could combat the Red Army. When Stalin became aware that such negotiations were underway, he went ballistic, accusing his U.S. allies of bad faith and betrayal. President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded that such accusations were vile misrepresentations of actuality. The worst fears of Allen Dulles for the post-war period began to materialize in February 1945, when the leaders of the Big Three, The United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union met at Yalta on the Black Sea to redraw the map of Europe. The eastern border of Germany was moved westward to the Oder and Neisse rivers, and parts of eastern Poland were handed over to the Soviets. What remained of Germany was to be divided into 4 zones of occupation, which would be administered by a council of military generals, including the French. As soon as the ink dried on the Yalta Agreement, Dulles transported Galen and his top representatives to Fort Hunt, Virginia, where they were wined and dined by Donovan and other U.S. officials. An agreement was reached. Galen would return to Germany under U.S. protection to establish the Galen Organization, which would receive full funding from U.S. Army G2 resources. The primary purpose of this organization would be the maintenance of the existing stay-behind armies and the recruitment of new guerrilla soldiers from the ranks of Third Reich veterans with staunch anti-communist credentials. These soldiers no longer would be known as werewolves. They were to be known as gladiators, who were commissioned to war off communist invaders in the great theater of post-war Europe, and the operation in which they were engaged was to be known as gladio, after the short swords that the Roman gladiators used to kill their opponents. Gladio expanded to Italy, where OSS officials, including James Jesus Angleton, secured the participation of Prince Junio Valerio Borghese, the leader of Decima Flotilla, better known as Ex-Mas, an Italian naval commando unit. After Italy signed an armistice with the Allies on September 8, 1943, Borghese and his 10,267 commandos opted to fight for the so-called Solo Republic that had been set up by the Nazis in northern Italy. The unit was given the task of attacking the Italian partisan bands that had sprouted up throughout Italy. The partisans were sponsored by the Italian Communist Party, Partito Comunista Italiano, or PCI. And thanks to Ex-Mas, thousands were found hanging from streetlights and flag posts by the end of the war. On April 13, 1945, Borghese met with General Wolfe and Angleton at a villa on Garda Lake, where they discussed the possibility of extending their war efforts beyond any peace treaty with the Soviets by redeployment of Ex-Mas under the covert direction of the OSS. Borghese was amenable to the terms, especially since his cooperation would save him from an Italian firing squad. Under Borghese, the Galdio forces in Italy were divided into 40-man groups, 10 specialized in sabotage, 6 in espionage, propaganda, and escape tactics, and 12 in guerrilla activities. A special training camp for members for the stay-behind units was set up in Sardinia, or Italy's western coast. The camp, thanks to the efforts of Galen and Wolfe, was soon swarming with new gladiators from Germany, France, and Austria. By 1946, when the OSS morphed into the Central Intelligence Group, the precursor of the CIA, hundreds of Gladio units were in place throughout Western Europe. But there was a problem that seemed insurmountable. Gladio was a covert operation that had been initiated not by an act of Congress or a mandate from the Pentagon. Few federal officials knew of its existence. The $200 million in original funding came primarily from the House of Rockefeller, since Gladio was to pave the way for a new world government under the control of the money cartel. But a new and steady stream of revenue had to be created almost overnight, since the operation would come to cost billions of dollars. But where could the cartel secure a source of funding? The answer would soon from Paul E. Helliwell, who was serving as the OSS Chief of Special Intelligence in China.
You have been listening to Bridge of Truth, brought to you by biblical teacher and author Jim Pugh with God is Government. For free access to all of Jim Pugh's Bridge of Truth podcast, please go to www.godisgovernment.com. Distribution of the Bridge of Truth and all other teachings are available for worldwide distribution. Thank you for joining us in this broadcast of Bridge of Truth.